Hello. In this video, I'd like to talk a little bit about Scratch. And so this is intended to be an introduction to Scratch if you've never used it before, or maybe a reintroduction if you haven't used it in a while. I am not a Scratch expert, mostly self-taught, so there are probably features that I'm not expert on, but I just want you to kind of get acquainted with it if you've never used it before. You may be new to coding, you may not be new to coding, so we'll just kind of explore what they have. So this is Scratch 3.0, which came out at the time of this recording at the beginning of the year, so about 6 months or so ago. So if you've used previous versions of Scratch, this might look a little bit different, but it's generally kind of the same thing. So when you bring up Scratch, which is, you can find it at scratch.mit.edu, you need to create an account. But if you go to the About screen here, they do have information for parents so that they can get a good idea about what Scratch is. It is a public website, so if you share the projects that you make, other people can see them within Scratch. So that is something that your parents may want to consider before signing you up. So going back to the main page. So once you have an account and once you sign in, over here is where you'll see your sign-in information. They will generally have news, and then they have these projects. So what you do in Scratch is you create little coding projects. So let's just create one to get an idea about what those look like. So there's a couple of ways to create one. One way is to click on this Create button. Another way is to go to your account information and go to My Stuff. And another way to get to this My Stuff area is to click on this folder here. So there's a number of ways to create one. So I'm going to create a project this first time using the Create button. And it creates your project, and this is what a kind of beginning project looks like. So there's lots of little pieces around here, so let's discuss what we got. So you've got different panes within this one screen. Let's see where to start. So over here there's a bunch of tabs. Right now I'm on the Code tab, and so there's different kinds of coding blocks, and this here this separates them into different categories. So right now, this blue set of blocks are called the motion blocks. You can move your different characters around and so forth. So we'll talk about that maybe a little bit later. I think what I'm going to do, though, is go first to this block to the right. And this is a little pane where you can see your project running. Like, what does your project look right now? And by default, they give you one character, and the characters are called sprites. So this sprite is the default one that comes with Scratch, and they have cleverly called him Scratchy. And so the information for this sprite is kept down in this pane. So you can see this sprite is called Sprite 1. And then there's some other information here we'll talk about. And then there's a little icon for him. So when he's selected, this is the sprite that has focus. And you can have more than one sprite. So if I wanted to create another sprite, down here there's a little plus sign, and it's got sort of a little scratchy face on it. So you can use sprites that come with Scratch, or you can create your own ones. For now, we're going to go look at ones that come with it. So I think if I click right here, this is a set of sprites. So here's all of them, or you can say, well, maybe I want to choose a different one. So here's Scratchy, that's the one we have. Maybe I want to pick another one, so maybe I'll pick a dog to go with Scratchy. So now I have two sprites, and right now they don't do much. So this is where the clicking on the different sprites gives you focus. So if I click on this one, now it's the Scratchy sprite that has focus. Now it defaults to different names. This one's called Sprite 1, which isn't a very good name. So I think I'll call this one Scratchy. And you can call it whatever you like. In the program, I can refer to him now as Scratchy instead of Sprite 1. So these X's and Y's will change his position. So I want to look at some other ones first. So you can show a sprite or you can hide a sprite. So you have the eye, and you have the eye with the international interdiction symbol over it. So if I click that, he disappears. He's hidden. He's still a sprite in the project, but he's hidden. You click the eyeball, he's back again. And you can do this within the program using blocks to say hide the sprite or show the sprite. The other thing here that sometimes is helpful to look at is the size. So the 100 says this is the 100% size of the sprite. So if you want the sprite to be bigger, you can change that to say 200, and now he's bigger. If you want him to be smaller than the normal size, I'm going to put him back to 100. You can change this to maybe 50% of his normal size. And again, this is another thing that you can change within the coding blocks themselves, so your program can set those things. You don't have to set it here. The direction is which direction is your sprite facing. So 90 degrees is that one. So let's go, and you can actually use this little dial here. So if you go to 0, sometimes it's hard to get to the exact spot there, but you can see how he's changing. So you can either use that turner thing, little arrow thing, or you can just type it in. And so you can see what the different directions do. They turn him in different ways. So for this guy, I'm just going to leave him as his default 90, which again, it's hard to get it exactly with that little spinner, but it can show you what it looks like. And again, you can direct this in your code itself to say maybe turn his direction. And you can do all the same thing with the dog sprite as well. So I'm just focusing on Scratchy. Now in here, this big window, that is where your code goes. And when you're coding, sometimes you want more space. So if you look at these little buttons up here, it'll change what your screen looks like. And I believe I'm in this one right now where this one is bigger. Now if you want more coding space, if you go to the left of that one and click on it, you get more coding space, and this is much smaller. What this one does is it's kind of what does the user see if they were to run the program without seeing the code. So if you click on this full screen one, all you see is the actual project window. And if you want to get back to the coding one, you just click it again and you're back here. So for now, just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to kind of keep it on this little display where the code section in here is the biggest. Now, if you've never worked with block coding before, let's kind of look what it can do, and in Scratch in particular. So I have my Scratchy one that's highlighted, so anything I put here will affect this sprite and not the little dog sprite. So the most common first program is called the Hello World program when you're learning a new language or system. So let's see how that's done in Scratch. So this is under the looks icon. Now what's nice here in Scratch 3.0 is you can actually scroll without having to click on these, so it's another way to get to the different kinds of blocks. So here's a block, and I want my Scratchy icon to say something. So I'm going to pull this into the code, and right now he's saying hello. So if I click on this, and let me make this bigger again, you can see over here now he says hello. And if I want to change his message, like I do for this one, which is I want to say hello world, when I click on that again, he will say that. Now what's nice about these little blocks is you can click on them anywhere. You can still click on it from here. And he'll say what you click on. Now this one, say hello for 2 seconds. So he'll say hello, and then 2 seconds later it stops, it goes away. You can have a think bubble. So it's slightly different than the say bubble. You can have him think it for 2 seconds and it will go away. So that's kind of just a very simple program. And so we have this idea of the green flag. So it will run your code. So what do we expect it to do? We want to see it say hello world. But I'm pressing the green flag, and you'll notice nothing's happening. Now Scratch is very event driven. So the code is waiting for an event, and that just means some kind of signal to go do something. So if you look along the side here, there's something called events. And again, you can scroll to it, or you can just click on it. And so we have different events. So one of the events is when the green flag is clicked. So I'm going to bring that over, and look how it snaps into place. So this says when somebody clicks on that green flag, do the following things that are connected to me. So now when I click on the green flag, you get the message. So this is your first kind of example of coding. And I do want to mention that if you're following along with this and you're sitting in front of your computer running Scratch, and I hope you are, feel free to kind of go along and do what this says and just follow the directions. You can pause this video at any time. You can replay it if you miss something. But it's kind of a cool way to kind of learn and do this interactively. So this is the first program. Now with Scratch, you'll see up here you get something called an untitled one. So you always want to give it some sort of name. So I'm going to call this one Hello World. Not a very original name, but it sure does describe what this does. So this share button, right now my project is private and only I can see it. Once you press the share button, then it's public and anybody on Scratch can see your project if they want to. So I personally don't usually make mine public. unless I feel it's a finished product. So I don't know if this is a finished product, because if you go to this thing, which is See Project page, and I'm going to click on that, this is what would show up to somebody searching on Scratch and they see your public project. So it is a really good idea to put instructions in all your projects so that people know what to do. So my project here, I would say click the green flag, which I don't know why I'm capping it, you probably don't have to start the program. This is a very simple program. If you're creating a more complex game, you may want to describe the different keys that people can press and how to restart the game, things like that. So to restart this game, which is not much of a game, press the green flag again. Okay, now notes and credit are actually kind of important. So you want to give credit to other people or other sites that you've used, other resources that have really helped you do this project. If you take some images from some other websites, if you're using something else, be sure to give credit. If you remix a project, and I'll talk about what that means in a minute, you want to give credit. So this one is basically, this project is based on a typical first project when learning a new language. And you really do want to fill in all these things before you do that. And so that way, anybody who comes across your project once you've shared it, they kind of know a little bit about your program, also about where you got your ideas from, and any other kinds of credit you should really give. So anyway, you click See Inside to go back to coding. And basically, that's our first program. I do want to point out a couple of other things here. Now, this is the Scratchy costume. Okay, across here, there's 3 different tabs. So here is Scratchy's costumes default. So here's the first one, but there's also a second one. And this is how you create animations. Now, I'm clicking back and forth between the 2 costumes, so it makes it look like Scratchy is walking. And you can, within your program, kind of go back and forth to these costumes. So here is a very quick program that maybe gives you an idea of some of the power here. So what I'm going to do is I want to make it look like Scratchy is kind of walking. And I'm just going to keep him in place for now for a set amount of time. So under Control, we have really the heart of the programming part of Scratch. These are the things that tell the different sprites what they should do. So let's see, what shall I do here? I'm going to repeat a certain number of times. So this says repeat all the instructions in here. Right now it's set to 10 times. You can change that. Maybe I only want to do it 5 times. Okay, so I'm going to go to motion. No, looks. I want looks. And I'm going to just say next costume. And then I'm going to go back to my control. And I'm going to have a wait command, which does what it sounds like. It's going to wait 1 second. So next costume says switch from the current costume and go through as many costumes as we have. We only have 2 costumes here, so each time it goes to next costume, it's just going to switch between these 2. It's going to do that 5 times, waiting 1 second each time through. And this gets started. Now you can run it right from your code here. And it's, if you look closely here, he's saying hello world and he's moving that many times. Or you can do it from the green flag, which is how a user would do that. And again, you can see him moving. And this is kind of, I'm testing out my project. It's not quite ready yet. I think maybe that's a little slow. So you could change the amount of time. So I'm going to change that to 0.5 or half a second. And maybe I want to do this 8 times instead. So again, I can click right here just to kind of test it out and see what it looks like. And maybe I like that better. And then I'm good. I'm kind of pointing out the Save Now button because I see it. If you're working with the online version of Scratch, save often. It is going to go down and you would lose all your changes. So saving now is pretty important. So that's costumes and that's code. Now there's also sound, which I'm not going to really go into, but you can actually have it make sound if you want to. Now I am not really using my little dog one, so I can actually delete this. So if you scroll, click on it, make sure you're clicking on it. So now this one is the focus. Now I could probably do the same thing for him here. And Scratch has a way of actually copying code. It's called the backpack and it's down here. So if I want to copy this code from one sprite to another, I can't just do a Control-C, Control-V kind of copy thing. You actually have to put it in what's called the backpack. So I'm sliding this in. It looks like it's going to go away. But what happens is it's going to put that in the backpack. So it's loading here. It's thinking about it. And it snaps back up here. And then I can go to the dog. And then I can pull this up here. And he can do the same thing. So when I click on this, now it's the dog who's doing it. You can see his costume has him stick his tongue out. When I press the green flag, so both of these have an event to say when the green flag is clicked. So they will both be activated. So if I click my green flag now, they're both kind of doing what we want. Now I would like it when I'm done for it not to say anything. So I think I'm going to put in one more look here. So at the end of the loop, I'm going to blank it out to say nothing. Now here's the thing, once you've made copies, I have to kind of do it for both of them. So if I go back to my Scratchy sprite, I could either go to the backpack and recopy this whole thing, or copy them individually. So not so great. But now what it looks like is, it's going to say hello world, and then when they're done doing their little custom switches, it ends. So I think that looks a little bit better. So this is the fun of programming, just kind of playing around, what makes it look better. I'm sure you can think of a lot of things you'd like them to do. Maybe they could walk across the screen, or they can collide, and when they collide, something happens. Lots of things you can do with Scratch, but perhaps out of scope of what I just want to do here, which is kind of demonstrate. So another thing that you can do with Scratch, so in addition to saving often, you can actually save these to files. So up here, there is the file, and you can say save now, which is sometimes that shows it here, or it says save it now. Save as a copy, so you can make another one. But look down here, you can save to your computer. So if you're running from a computer that isn't, I think you want more than a Chromebook for this, either a Windows machine or a Mac machine. If you say save to your computer, so I'm on a Mac, so you saw that kind of go down there. It saves it into, I think it's .sb is the extension, into that file. And then you can load from your computer. So here's my hello world. I guess it's SB3. I can load that in. And okay, so it will replace what I have, but I know that it's the same one. So it's a way of kind of saving your projects offline. And you know, Scratch is wonderful, but it is an online tool. Sometimes things go down, sometimes you lose things. So it's kind of a good idea to make those kinds of saves. Another thing you can do is you can actually delete these. So let's say I'm like, I don't really want that say. You can actually just throw it off to the side, and that's the way to delete blocks you don't want. I actually do want it, so I'm going to put it back. Another important thing with coding in general is to comment your code. So the way you make comments is you do a right click, which is I'm clicking right click, and it says add comment. So I'm going to add an overall comment for this particular sprite. And I'm going to say I am in the Scratchy sprite. And I find sometimes that doing this just helps me remember where I am, because I have found sometimes you forget which sprite you're in and maybe you code in the wrong place. Now usually there's a little picture up here which I'm not seeing, but there's like a little picture of the sprite that you're working on. I'm not sure why it's not showing up here so well, but you can do that. You can also comment code, which is also an important thing to get into the habit of doing. So if I click here and say add a comment, you can give an overall comment about what this set of blocks are doing. I think I'm going to make another video about what makes a good comment, but get in the habit. Most people don't like to put them in, but trust me, either you will forget what you meant if you look at this a few weeks from now, or maybe you want to work with another person. They're not going to understand. So basically, I'm going to just put a little comment here. Have the sprite rotate through its costumes. Oops. And that's the comment here. And you can move it a little closer. You can make it smaller, so that next time you look at this and you don't remember what it was supposed to do, now you've got it. And I think I'm going to save this one back again too. Now I want to go back to Scratch here just to show you another thing, because again I was discussing, you know, what happens if Scratch is down. If you are running on something, I would say again, bigger than a Chromebook, either Microsoft Windows or on a MacBook or something like that, you can actually create an offline version of Scratch, And so I'm scrolling to the bottom of the window here under, yes, support. So if you go to the support and look at offline editor, and again, make sure you have permission from your parents if you're using a personal device here to do this, but you can actually put the Scratch desktop onto your computer. Now I'm running this from a MacBook, so it's only showing me Mac OS, and I've already done this. I've downloaded it and I followed the directions, and now I can run this without needing an internet connection. So if you start this, run this from a Windows machine, presumably this will be lit and it will help you download from there. And I'm going to show you what it looks like, hopefully. So here is the Scratch desktop version. So you can actually load in something that you were working on as long as you saved it to your computer. I can actually load in what I was working on, and it's exactly what I was doing online, but now I'm doing it offline. And then when you're done making any changes, you can save it back to a file in your computer and then upload it back to the online version. So if it's something you want to work on at home and then you want to work on at school, it gives you a lot of flexibility. So if you are able to do this, I recommend it, because we have found times where Scratch, the website goes down and you want to be able to still work. So if you've saved often and you have the file version of your projects, you can actually load it in here. It's not exactly the same. I don't believe it has the backpack and slightly less things here, but it is kind of a useful little tool, so I want you to be aware of it. Other things that are kind of helpful if you're just playing around here, by all means, go ahead and create some projects and bring some of those blocks over and see what they do. So what Explore is, these are projects that other people have written. And so if you want to see, this one is a kind of a cool little project somebody wrote, you can run their project, see how this person did a great job with their notes and credits and how this works. There's a place for comments. There is a code of conduct on Scratch, which is, I want to make sure we are encouraging and positive. There's nothing wrong with making constructive criticisms, but doing it in a kind way. Nobody really likes to be insulted, and this is meant to be a really nice community. If the Scratch people find you are not being very nice on here, they will kick you off. So, and rightly so. So make sure you're keeping your comments constructive. If you want your projects to not have comments, you can get rid of them. And this is the remix button I was talking about. You can actually make a copy of this. Now, if you were to make a copy of this one and maybe change it or do something else with it, you would definitely make a note or a credit in the notes and credit, crediting this person, because that's where you got it from, and that's kind of the etiquette for it. So that's kind of cool. The other thing you can do is under Ideas, they do have tutorials. So if you are brand new to Scratch, or it's been a while and you're not really up to speed, you can choose a tutorial. They have a Getting Started one as well, so you might want to try with that if you've never done this. But you can also say choose a tutorial, and there's a whole bunch of them that you can play around with. So I would start with the simpler ones if you've never coded. Maybe you want to go to something a little more advanced the more you do this. So anyway, a lot of information. I would say maybe try a very simple Hello World type of project, and then go ahead and try something a little more complicated. I will have some other videos to kind of talk about some example projects that you can do and other hints and tips. So stay tuned, and thanks again for watching and listening.